Hello again everyone, welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Great topic coming up, let's get right to it. What celebrity had the fastest, hardest, and most destructive downfall of their career from their peak? Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Kurt Cobain formed Nirvana in '87 and went from playing record store gigs and dive bars in the late '80s to putting out Nevermind, a record that knocked Michael Jackson out of the #1 spot in January of '92. Back then, something like that was unheard of and considered impossible in the industry. For the next couple of years, Nirvana were arguably one of the biggest and most popular rock bands in the world, but Cobain was already thinking of ways to essentially sabotage the band's popularity because he was so uncomfortable with how famous they got while dealing with his own inner demons and drug addiction. They performed at the Reading Festival in '92 in what many consider one of the great live rock performances of all time. Put out their second major studio album, In Utero, in February of '93 that went to #1 instantly, despite the record company originally thinking it was unreleasable and some major retailers refusing to sell it due to the album art and the song Rape Me. Performed their iconic MTV Unplugged set in November of '93, despite Cobain being in the heavy throes of heroin addiction and them not knowing if he'd be able to perform until showtime. In March of '94, he intentionally OD'd in Rome while on a European tour, came back home, went to rehab for a couple of days, hopped the fence, and a week later, he blew his head off with a shotgun, allegedly. Nirvana has sold over 75 million records worldwide, despite only being a band for less than 7 years, and only releasing essentially 2 major label albums, Nevermind and In Utero, 1 indie album, Bleach, 1 album of B-sides, Incesticide, the MTV Unplugged album, and a greatest hits album, Nirvana. I'd say that qualifies as a pretty destructive downward spiral, especially considering their ascent was so rapid as well. Aaron Hernandez played tight end for the New England Patriots, fresh off a new contract, killed his friend, found guilty, then took his own life during the appeal. I mean, Oscar Pistorius was a pretty sharp fall from Paralympian champion role model to spouse murderer. The Hollywood of yesteryear had more than its fair share of career implosions, such as Fatty Arbuckle and Harry Langdon, but few can match Wallace Reed. Described as the screen's most perfect lover, he was an all-around athlete and musician who wanted to move from theater to film. He approached Vitagraph Studios with a story, hoping he could direct it, but the studio jumped on the opportunity to cast the 6-foot blue-eyed Reed as a matinee idol. By 1922, he had appeared in nearly 200 pictures and even tried out for the Indy 500. Reed was hiding a secret, however. In 1919, he had been involved in a train wreck and was prescribed morphine for his injuries. As the pressure of stardom grew, he rapidly became addicted, regularly spending $1,000 on morphine, but audiences noticed his rapid weight loss and gaunt features. He collapsed on set in October 1922 and was sent to a sanatorium, where he was locked in a padded cell as he tried to detox. He died of influenza on January 19, 1923, and his death was a huge shock to the public, the first celebrity drug death. Jared Fogle, the subway guy. The things discovered about him are quite disturbing. Prison is an appropriate place for him. Chris Benoit, world-famous and beloved wrestler who committed a double homicide, son and wife, suicide. Jan Michael Vincent of Airwolf fame. His alcohol and drug abuse ruined a promising career and turned him into a walking mummy towards the end. Gia Karanji. She started modeling in 1978 at 18, reached her peak in 1979 and was considered the supermodel. But by 1980, her career was already in steep decline due to her hardcore drug addiction alongside her erratic personality, making her a difficulty to work with. By 1981, her career was basically over at only age 21. She tried to make multiple comebacks, but it never stuck, and officially left the modeling industry for good in '83. She ended up working as a store clerk and even a prostitute for some time, but in 1986, she ended up dying of AIDS at age 26, suspected to be caused by contaminated heroin needles. She was in such poor condition when she died that when the doctors picked her up, the skin fell off her back. No one in the fashion industry attended her funeral or even knew that she died. She fell just as quickly as she rose. In the end, no one she thought cared about her in New York ended up being there for her during her final months, except for the friends she made in rehab. Though, through the demise of Gia, brought about the rise of Cindy Crawford. Cindy and Gia share a lot of resemblance, so many photographers would use her in place of Gia because she was far easier to work with. She was even nicknamed Baby Gia at the beginning of her career. So this was one of the people in this whole list that I didn't know. I didn't remember her, and I'm sorry. What a sad fall, and just tragic. T.J. Miller called a bomb threat on a train he was on when he was rejected by someone he was trying to flirt with. Well, Ian Watkins went from frontman of a world-famous rock band to doing 30 years for child sex offenses. I would have to say Whitney Houston. I suspect many people here would either not alive or too young to remember how insanely big Houston was. I do. She was literally the biggest female artist in the world and one of the biggest artists, and this was before social media. She holds the record for having 7 consecutive #1 singles on the Billboard Top 100, record sales of over 200 million, a host of awards including 28 Guinness World Records. The only other artist that could stand shoulder to shoulder with Whitney in regards to success would be Michael Jackson. However, between 2000 and 2005, her entire career and life completely disintegrated. Her marriage to Bobby Brown, her addiction to crack, the car crash that was her own reality TV show utterly destroyed her career. She attempted to come back in 2009 or 10 by doing a world tour, but it was painful to watch, to say the least. She was unable to hit the high notes. She no longer had the range she had. Many performances were cancelled. I think it was one in Australia, which was an utter car crash. She made the audience wait for hours, and when she did appear, she simply couldn't sing. Pretty much everyone booed her, and she got the F out in a very short time. The general consensus was her tour was a major flop. She tried to come back a couple times afterwards, but she never even got close to her former glory. I have never seen somebody who arguably was the world's biggest artist fall so hard and fast as Whitney Houston. Mark Salling, the guy who played Puck in Glee, maybe not the biggest star, but he was a fan favorite on a huge show, got caught with child pornography, pled guilty, then hung himself. That's a pretty hard downward spiral. Someone who was born into one of the most famous families in the world, so would have anything he wanted. What he wanted was just that little bit too far. No sweating it. Come on down, Prince Andrew. I think of Chris Farley. His SNL career started in '92. His real break came with Tommy Boy in '94, dead by '98 at 33 years old. Horribly addicted to drugs, alcohol, food, and other impulse-related stuff probably. Probably gained 100 pounds in his 6-year run. OD'd on a speedball, as everyone seems to. Everybody of that era claims he was the funniest guy they've ever known, and most of them talk about being frustrated both by his lack of any self-worth, despite how beloved he was, and a feeling of inevitability about his early demise. Obviously, Chris wasn't destructive like some of the other scumbags mentioned on this thing. He was simply self-destructive. People like to compare him to John Belushi. They had pretty much the same self-destructive trajectories, both fat dudes, both highly energetic performers, but as people, I think they were very different. I think he's more comparable to Robin Williams. They both had this insatiable need to make people laugh, and they both had this superhuman energy. By all accounts, Chris, like Robin, was an incredibly sweet and sensitive person in private life. Apparently, he'd spend a lot of time volunteering at children's hospitals in Madison, Wisconsin, and he didn't even talk about it. I've heard a million takes on Farley, and it's always heartbreaking and telling that 25 years later, people still talk about it and can't get over it. I mean, Farley was great, and growing up in the 90s, I was a big fan. I also loved Phil Hartman, if you want to talk about tragic endings, though it wasn't his doing, but his wife's. But Farley was a good one. Kevin Spacey getting revealed to be a predator, using his sexuality as an excuse, getting fired from his projects, and then posting an insane supervillain-level YouTube video as Frank Underwood, basically blaming the viewers for being complicit. Has everyone forgotten Charlie Sheen? Did Winning stop winning? What about Tiger Blood and a bevy of porn stars? He went down so hard they made a series vaguely based on it and cast him in the lead role. In all honesty, it's gotta be John Wilkes Booth. The man was from a prestigious acting family, and not only famous from his own skill and roles on stage, but became seriously wealthy too, and was in demand across the country. People knew him. He was 26 years old and a goddamn superstar. But he had sympathies with the Confederacy and planned to kidnap Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States, with the help of conspirators to end the war more favorably. When they surrendered, he was enraged, changed the plan to kill Lincoln and several high-ranking officials with the help of his conspirators and make the South rise up and welcome him as a hero. And then he killed Lincoln. This wunderkind, acting behemoth, barely passed his mid-20s, with a famous family and a huge amount of prestige and wealth to his name, killed the President of the United States in the pursuit of a delusional belief that he could change the outcome of an already decided war. He not only dissolved his own reputation in an instant, as both the Union and the former Confederate states were left utterly horrified by his act, but was killed within 2 weeks of an extensive manhunt and took several hours to die a painful, humiliating death. And on top of that, he removed a great reformer who could have positively rebuilt the former Confederate states and helped eliminate the institutions left over, having him replaced with a more neutral leader who disagreed with the idea of Reconstruction and ended it prematurely, setting back the redevelopment of the South while also causing it to severely regress to such an extent that it still isn't fully resolved from the Civil War nearly 2 centuries later. That, friends, is the fastest, hardest, and most destructive downward spiral of a celebrity from their peak. Bill Cosby, yeah. He was America's favorite dad, stand-up comic, had several very successful TV shows, spokesman at colleges, then poof, he's just a dirty, creepy guy who spiked your drink so he can get some. The Bill Cosby fall was really shocking. I mean, you could assume some people have some skeletons in their closet and whatnot, but I mean, rapey Cosby was not cool, and this guy was top of the world. Oh well. Amanda Bynes went from the girl next door, cast in every teen movie, to a conservatorship and addiction issues. I know it's a bit niche, but Conor McGregor. He wasn't everyone's superstar. Ask people from Ireland and they'll tell you they hate his guts. Still, while he was a controversial and cantankerous figure, he was mostly inoffensive on his meteoric rise. Blew through contenders like paper, destroyed the greatest featherweight ever with one punch, and his ego got out of control. He got brought back down to earth by Nate Diaz, adjusted his approach, and went up a division to dethrone the lightweight champ. First simultaneous double champion. Conor Mania was in. Everyone was raving about him. Highest selling pay-per-view star in MMA, celebrity appearances. If you thought of combat sports from 2015 to 17, you thought of the name Conor McGregor. All that box office success drove him to a matchup with Floyd Mayweather. Months of back and forth trash talk as Conor was known for, but as the talk progressed, it felt like Conor was losing a step. It seemed like all the wit and charm he had on the rise was eroding. Then came the fight. And it was the usual spectacle of a Conor performance, but Floyd destroyed his aura of being untouchable. At the same time, Conor got exactly what he always dreamed of, more money than any human should have. This money led to a sense of invincibility. He flew halfway around the world to throw a dolly at the bus of his rival Khabib with a pack of Irish gangsters. The glass from the window the dolly smash injured several fighters in the bus. He was arrested but got off easy. Money. The Khabib fight was the biggest in his career. 2 years of layoff, returning to face an unstoppable juggernaut. The press conferences were packed with vitriol and pure bile rather than the typical tongue-in-cheek charm. It was uncharacteristic, or rather, it was the mask coming off at last. He got humiliated badly, and everything went wild. Cocaine, sexual assault scandals, whether true or not, alcohol. He started his own whiskey brand. Apparently it's garbage, not bad. But don't take it from me. Take it from the old man he sucker punched in a bar for refusing to drink it. Another 2 years off. He comes back against Donald Cerrone, someone well below his level and everyone knows it. He's surprisingly mild-mannered and kind in the leading up to the fight. It's unclear if this is the new him, the real him, or another mask. He seems to be back on track. Another year off, thanks COVID. He makes a cordial fight offer to former opponent Dustin Poirier, world-class good guy of a sport. The lead-up to their rematch is mild and gentlemanly as befitting a seemingly reformed McGregor and a laid-back Louisiana slugger. It's an electrifying rematch regardless, and the last time we ever see this side of him again. He gets humiliated again, badly. In the aftermath he's cordial, but in the lead-up to the rubber match, something snaps. Cocaine, anxiety, alcohol, something goes wrong, and goes wrong badly because he returns with an uncharacteristic, substanceless viciousness. He starts involving Dustin's family in dirty, charmless ways, attacks him at the press conference. He can't get his charm going because it's been replaced with coke and cash. The fight itself ends with McGregor on the ground, his leg snapped in two, screaming obscenities at Dustin and promising that he and his family will die in their sleep. He uses his post-fight interview to rant about how it's not over, and he'll still batter Dustin in the parking lot on one leg. There's nothing left of the young Irish kid who made it big. Now there's just a bitter laughingstock ranting on the floor about another man's wife and leaving the sport that made him famous behind on a stretcher.